Humbie Dean won't be open as anticipated on April the 6th, but if you'd been able to come, here's some of what you might have seen starting at the house. Hamish looks his usual miserable self. He's presiding over some snowflakes, which in my mind are actually rather better than snowdrops. They do tend to rather self-seed. The next thing you'd have seen would be some Primula elatior and the wonderful Coridalis George P Baker. The Corydalis has the great advantage of flowering early and then disappearing completely by the end of May, early June, so you can grow other things through it. In this case, autumn flowering crocuses. There are a lot of hellebores in flower in the garden at the moment. I used to grow them all in clumps of just one colour, and then I realised that, particularly for the darker colours, it was actually quite hard to notice them against the bare earth and against the mulch. You notice that everywhere is mulched, not just for feeding purposes, but also to deter the weeds. Unfortunately, the birds can spread the mulch about. Cardamine pentaphylia, the beautiful purple ephemeral plant you see coming up here, and it's growing through a persicaria, is a bit like the Corydalis. It appears from nowhere, flowers incredibly quickly, and then disappears without trace, and is perfectly happy going through something else. The first of the daffodils to appear here are usually the miniature ones, the tete-a-tetes, the February gold, the jacksnipes, and they're usually growing alongside Pulmonaria to the left. This is a particularly good one. It's Pulmonaria Diana Claire. We shear the flowers off once they're finished, and the Pulmonaria looks like a hosta without all the problems of hosta till the end of the season. The erythroniums, the dog's tooth violets, are growing very rapidly, and in amongst them there are little clumps of cyclamen coum, which has the nice habit of spreading itself about by seed. And you'll see a variegated vimca, the blue, in the middle left-hand corner. The little daffodils are everywhere in clumps. They're planted, they're left alone, left to die back normally. We don't deadhead, we certainly don't cut back the foliage other than in the meadow. White hellebores do stand out, in my opinion, far, far more than their darker leafed cousins, or darker one cousins. Now, colour isn't all about flowers. I think this Bergenia, which is Eroica, is extraordinary when you see miniature daffodils growing through it. The daffodils disappear without trace, probably by about the end of July. The Bergenia turns a dark green and covers itself in bright pink flowers. Growing through it, some red-stemmed dogwood and a few deciduous azaleas which are still to show signs of life. But inter and underplanting can make a small bed have interest over a very, very long period. There aren't many heathers here. Those which are here are ones which were inherited, and again contrast with the dark-leaved Bergenia and February gold narcissi. In the background, a variegated pyrrhus, and poking through the mulch elsewhere, Scilla siberica. The mice tend to pick the bulbs up and move them around the place where they don't actually eat them, so we never have any big clumps of these, but rather individual plants appearing in isolated places. I've included another shot of the Primula elatior because here it is with a cowslip in the foreground. So you have cowslip and oxlip in the same picture. Dark-coloured foliage, in this case a euphorbia. I think this is bloodtooth or bluetooth. Again, sets off or provides a contrast to cyclamen coum. The very first of the rhododendrons is in flower. This one normally, Rhododendron Christmas Cheer, which many years is frosted, but this year has got off scot-free. Everywhere there are pulmonarias. They're a rather promiscuous species. They tend to intermingle, so we get all sorts of variations arising. Some are particularly attractive. And in the distance, and this has been in flower now for several months, is the ornamental pyrrhus. The scent on a calm evening is absolutely stunning this year, and these white flowers will be followed by very attractive red bracts, which unfortunately run the risk of being frosted if they appear too early. We don't turn our nose up at commoner garden things, particularly when they're effective as ground cover. In this case, it's a form of comfrey. Ground cover is wonderful in that it reduces weeding and it also provides interest. And the comfrey flowers at a very bleak time of the year. Another form of ground cover, which isn't very widely grown, is this one. This is Chrysoplenium davidii. This is the first year it's ever flowered in Humbie Dean. The reason being that in previous years the rabbits have eaten it. Last year we fenced most of the ornamental garden, and we're seeing things we've never seen before. Further down the slope, as you descend into the dell, the voles have eaten a lot of the buds on the hellebores this year. You can see that some clumps have practically no flowers whatsoever. And again, the bleakness is interrupted by Pulmonaria in the top right, in this case Teviot blue, and by miniature daffodils appearing through what will soon, we hope, become a display of Candelabra Primula. On the slope above those hellebores is a most extraordinary member, and should be much more widely grown in my view, of the bramble family. This is Spectabilis Olympic double. The flowers aren't quite the same size as a camellia, but it's much less fussy as to where it grows. It's totally resistant to frost. It's non-invasive. What is not to like? Wandering further down the slope, another Pulmonaria. This is a self-seeded version of Teviot blue. And then beginning to climb back up again and looking out over the meadow, we had timed the first opening for April the 6th, hoping to get it right for the daffodils to be in full bloom. We might well have succeeded. As you can see, they're almost there. Looking down from the meadow towards where the waters, the two little burns meet, you see some species hellebores, in this case Argutifolius and Fetidus, both of which self-seed but not invasively, and we shear off the old growth. Once the flowers die, you can see the new red stems coming up at the bottom. The various wire supports and nettings are to prevent deer, rabbits, hares eating in this part of the garden, and also to provide a degree of support for some of the plants later on. More hellebores, in this case double ones. Hellebores unfortunately hang their heads down, so if it's possible to grow them in such a way that they can be seen from below, their flowers are much more easily appreciated. And the first new shoots are beginning to appear on Pyrrhus forest flame, which is probably the more frost-resistant of the two which are commonly available. It looks rather bleak down where the waters meet. Some hellebores in the distance, white ones which haven't been touched by the voles this year. And then coming back up towards the top, variegated vinca. Don't turn your nose up at very common plants providing colour and interest at this time of the year. Pyrrhus, again, beginning to produce their coloured bracts and hopefully avoiding a sharp frost. More hellebores, this a clump that has largely been ignored by me and ignored by the voles. A self-seeded clump where the variation in colours actually makes it stand out all the more. And finally, a stand of Coridalis George P Baker, Anemone blanda, and Chrysoplenium davidii in the background. This is an underplanting amongst some deciduous azaleas. The deciduous azaleas will provide colour and interest into May and June. The ground cover will slowly disappear and the mulch will take over. And that's about it. I've concentrated on flowers. I haven't, in this quick tour, I haven't looked at foliage, I haven't looked at shrubs. That perhaps is for another time. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'm sorry you can't visit us.